Hi, my name is Raimond, and I want to talk to you a little bit about how to use a chronograph properly. It's very important that you know how to use a chronograph properly because it's very easy to break them. Whether it's a vintage chronograph or a modern chronograph, the principles are the same. Number one thing, and we do get customers that come into our shop and they want to look at chronograph watches, and sometimes I'm out and about at watch shows, and it's surprising how many people think they know how to use a chronograph properly, but they do not. And the first step to using a chronograph properly is to wind the watch. If it is a manual wind watch, you want to turn the crown forward or clockwise until it stops. If it's an automatic watch, about 25 to 30 turns of the crown forward ensures that it's got enough power for you to be able to use the chronograph. You do not want to grab a chronograph and just start pushing the buttons randomly, especially if it doesn't have power in the mainspring. That is a very easy way to break the chronograph, to get the function stuck, and then a watchmaker would need to open it up to reset those functions. So again, don't grab a chronograph and just start pressing the buttons. And now, for most of the chronographs, for about 90% of the chronographs out there, they operate in this way. The top pusher is to start and to stop, and the bottom pusher is to reset all the hands up in the upright position, or the 12 o'clock position as we call it. So again, this chronograph was fully wound, and now I can start pressing the buttons. What you don't want to do, you don't want to press them out of order. Don't press the bottom pusher, or don't just start pressing this start, stop. You don't want to do that either. If you read any of the original instructions that came with these watches, it will actually tell once you start the chronograph, if you're just starting to test it, don't stop it every few seconds. Let this chronograph hand run at least a full 60 seconds around, and then stop and reset. Now, that's not to say you can't use it to time up to like 5 seconds or 10 seconds or 15 seconds. You can. But one of the biggest mistakes that people do, they almost, it's hard to describe, but they're almost like attracted to the idea of just starting and stopping this is a good thing, and that's not a good thing. So in most cases, when you start a chronograph, you're going to let it run at least 60 seconds to make sure it functions properly, and then you want to stop it by pressing the top pusher and reset it by using the bottom pusher. Don't use the bottom pusher out of order. Wait, do it properly. So the hand went around almost 60 seconds. And now we're going to stop it and we're going to reset it. And when you press these also, you don't want to like linger. You don't want to push it in and hold for a long time and then release. You also don't want to just barely tap it. There's a proper way. Just push and release, but do it firmly enough to where you have like a good balance, to where you're not damaging the watch, but at the same time, you don't want to push and hold so the functions get stuck. Now keep in mind that a chronograph like this is made to where you can time something. It has different registers. It has a register here in the 3 o'clock position where you can time something up to 30 minutes. And it also has a register at the bottom where you can time something up to 12 hours. And then here on the side, this is your second hand. A lot of times people, even with quartz battery operated watches, if they don't see this big hand going on all the time, they think that the watch is broken. The watch is not broken. Again, your second hand is right there. That small hand is moving around. This hand is only to be used on demand as needed when you're timing something. Also, I do know clients that like to have that hand on going all the time, meaning 24/7, 365. And that's not what it was intended to do. For example, a watch like this has a power reserve. If you fully wind it, it has a power reserve of about 42 hours. When you're using the chronograph, that power reserve goes down to about 15 hours, and then the watch will stop. And a lot of people say, oh, the watch is damaged, the manufacturer didn't do a good job on the movement, or the watchmaker didn't do a proper job servicing it. No, it was made to function like that. Even a Rolex Daytona, if you leave that chronograph hand running non-stop, it'll run about 14-15 hours on a full wind. So remember that. If you, and yes, it's made to time even up to 12 hours if you look at this register here. But if you're going to do that, after a few hours, the mainspring is spent, so it's okay to wind the watch to give it power again. Again, you can't wind the watch and expect it to have 42 hours of power reserve if you're using that chronograph hand non-stop. So again, we started earlier, now we're gonna stop, and now we're gonna reset, okay? And so that's about it. So, as I was saying, I don't know what I was saying, because I filmed the other part earlier, so I completely forgot. Let me get some other chronographs. So to recap, and here's a different chronograph now that I'm holding. It's also a Speedmaster. But to recap, wind the watch before you want to do anything. Manual wind it all the way until it stops. An automatic, wind it 30-35 times. And remember, the watches, they were not made to run with the chronograph on continuously. So if a watch like this has a power reserve of approximately 42 hours, even like a Rolex Daytona, if the chronograph is on all the time, the watch will run for about 14-15 hours and then stop altogether because it's using the power in the mainspring. So here's a vintage Seiko chronograph from the 1970s, and one of the reasons, well, there's two reasons why a lot of these or any 1970s Seiko chronographs don't work that well. They always have issues with their chronograph. One of the reasons is the material that they used inside for the movement is not a very good material. People didn't service them that often. But these, you can never manually wind these. And a lot of people, when they pick these up, they would shake them a couple times, put them on the wrist, and then start using the chronograph function. That's not enough. Like for a vintage Seiko like this, you either put it on a watch winder and let the watch winder wind it for like 24 hours, or you literally need to take it in your hand and shake it like at least 500 times like this, and then start using the chronograph functions. If you don't want to do that, don't use the chronograph functions on a vintage Seiko, or buy a different watch. Not saying that to be rude or anything, but that's just the proper way to use it. A chronograph watch needs to have power reserve in order for you to use the chronograph functions, and for those chronograph functions not to malfunction. Here's an automatic watch, modern automatic watch. This you can wind 30-35 times, and then start, stop, reset. If you leave the chronograph on, no matter how good the watch is, 14-15 hours with the chronograph going continually will stop the watch. The chronograph seconds hand is not to be used as a second hand to show that, hey, the watch is working. Now remember earlier I said that about 90-95% of the watches use start and stop for the top button, and the bottom button is to reset. This is an exception. This is a vintage Leonidas. This is the like 5% of watches. You start with the top button, and you don't stop with the top button. You stop and reset with the bottom button. Again, most watches start, stop, reset. If you have any more questions, reach out to me. Raimond at paulswatchrepair.com, and Raimond is spelled with an I, not a Y. Call our shop 916-483-0207. I'd love to discuss it further with you or help you. The only other thing I can say is if you use a chronograph regularly, service your watch every 5 years. Another reason why a lot of the vintage Seiko chronographs are worn out or not working properly is because people did not service them throughout their life, and they use them but they don't service them. Service your watch. Chronograph watches, keep them out of water. I don't care how waterproof any watch is. You see these pushers here? Very easy, unless they're screw down pushers like in a Rolex Daytona. No matter how good the pusher is, even if the gasket is new, even if you put silicone inside, try to seal it as good as you can, water is still gonna go inside around these pushers. Keep these out of water, especially vintage watches. Keep them out of water. A lot of times people send us these watches and they want them to be completely waterproof, even brand new. A lot of these chronographs were not waterproof, they were only water resistant, meaning you go out in the rain, it rains, water splashes on them, it's not gonna go inside, but they were not meant to be taken in the pool, hot tub, shower, etc. Talk to you soon.